Welcome to Medusa's Circle, where Sanyelle has forced me to become a YouTube star, which I'm just like, I could never. But if you could see me now, if you're listening, dear podcast listener, I am fluffing my hair and I made myself look really cute. But this is the problem. It's a little distracting to see my beautiful self, not to mention I have Dolly Parton, Saint Dolly behind me. But we're going to struggle through it so that we can make all of that hot YouTube money.
Yes. Okay. So we started recording at what, like an hour ago?
Well, we started to begin our recording
journey.
Yes.
It's Mercury retrograde and it's a learning process. It's the fucking first time. And so I honestly think that as far as like content that we can use and time spent deleting, I am hopeful that because I can see your face and this feels like a real conversation, that there won't need to be as much editing, except for just the first 3 minutes of this whole conversation.
Yeah, I'm going to edit all of this out. So
not all of this. This is great.
This is what the masses want.
It is. Yeah. So for those of you listeners who are listening and not watching us for whatever reason you would choose not to do that.
There's like a lot of reasons.
I don't watch
don't
YouTube
shame
videos.
Our listeners. Yeah. Yeah, you made it sound like it was a bad thing. Oh, what are you on Spotify? Are you on your way to work? Asshole.
Yeah. You need to pull over right now.
Pull over.
And watch us.
You are missing out on our incredibly spooky theme. So I'm wearing my pentagram dress and we are in all black and white. So we are really leaning into our Scorpio vibes.
Yes. I have summoned Satan and he sits at my right hand.
Yeah. Hi, Nux. How's it going, kitty?
Just all imagine that Satan is just sitting calmly at my side, which he is. Okay, so what's new, Ruth? Other than becoming a YouTube star?
Well, first of all, I'm becoming a YouTube star. What's new? I actually didn't plan this part of the podcast at all because I'm very good at everything.
You are. Well, I know that you're going to nail it when you wing it right now.
Yep. What's new? Well, I am still adjusting to my new work-life situation. It's an adjustment and I'm trying to allow myself both the grieving process of re-entering not just the workforce, because I've been working for a minute, but re-entering financial stress that's underlying everything every day, all the time. So when I was on unemployment, it just was for the first time in my life, I just knew that my bills were going to be paid. And I knew I was just going to enjoy that. And I did. And I refused to be disappointed in myself because I didn't like girl boss my way through a goddamn pandemic. And, you know, I don't have my like, I don't know, Fortune 500 company yet that I will never have because fuck that. But, you know, I don't have my like little business all set up. But yeah, getting used to the, I don't know, it's not just getting used to the stress because I don't want to go back to where I was before. I want to have allowed this time without the financial stress that I had before. I want to have allowed it to, wow, it's not coming out. I would like, you're just fucking pouring your wine, asshole.
No, I'm not.
You're like, wow, she's not killing it, even though she's trying to wing it. Anyway, I would like to allow the time that I've had to have taught me and to be teaching me a different way to have a relationship with money and abundance and scarcity. Because I feel like it was a taste of the abundant planet that we do actually live on. And now we're back in scarcity mode. And,
We're being gaslit about the whole pandemic.
But yeah, we're just more and more in scarcity mode. And that's kind of what we're hearing from our government in every way. That was like a little toot of a horn, just a little like
perfect. A nice punctuation.
Mm-hmm. That trucker agrees. But yeah, so I'm trying to sort of live in the spiritual and physical reality of abundance while grappling with the very real lived experience of a scarcity society, a scarcity based society, I guess. So it's hard because I'm just dealing with stress. And it's nothing I haven't done before. Like, it's not, in some ways I'm like, all right, back to this, like, let's go. But yeah, it's just kind of sad to have lost that freedom, I guess. And I think what I'm trying to adjust to is like a kind of spiritual reality and a spiritual perspective on this, where like I am where I'm supposed to be, even in the midst of this capitalist hellscape. And though I can point out the many oppressive ways that I, as like a working class person, suffer under capitalism, it doesn't mean that I am not meant to be here, and that I'm not divinely held. So yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hard because it is like the spiritual tradition that we come from was very harmful about that kind of thing, where it was like God decided to like kill off Job's family and shit. So like God might just put you through a bunch of suffering just to like test your faith, and God's a real dick. And how do I believe in like being divinely held and supported without making that divinity an asshole for putting me in capitalism?
That's a lot.
I know.
I think too that like we're at such an interesting point with the labor shortage.
The what?
And I've been like seeing these posts circulating about how like there's this like theater that's happening around, we can't find anyone, no one wants to work anymore, and then people are like, I've applied to like 20 different jobs and they just want to offer me like super part-time hours or really low wages, and or they're just like completely misrepresenting, like we know that it's much more affordable for businesses to operate on skeleton crews if they can, and so they would rather just exploit the workers who can't leave than actually play ball and be ethical, sane people. But
Yeah, it's really
yeah.
depressing. That's so frustrating.
And I think
it feels like it's just more and more leading us into blaming the victim, blaming people for not being able to get a job, blaming people for not accepting the shitty jobs they've been offered, etc.
yeah. And like to your point about like being here and in this moment, like I have been recently like venerating my ancestors, and I've noticed that in that Facebook group that we're in, there's been a lot of folks asking questions about ancestral veneration and things that are coming up for them in their ancestral practices. And, like it is that time of year, like we're approaching Samhain and like Day of the Dead. And I think that maybe they're, if not like a conscious like choice to be working towards ancestor veneration at this time, that it's at least a subconscious, like this is when the veil is thin and we're all just kind of drawn in this direction. But I like think about like if there are so many of us doing that specific work where we're reaching back and our ancestors are reaching forward, like at the same time where I feel like there's really this like spiritual awakening happening where I know more and more folks like, what if we were here at this time because we are going to usher in what is new and better?
So, Sanyelle, tell me how you have been. How are things going with you?
They are interesting. I have 2 shifts left at my old job, and I am 5 weeks in to training at my new job, which just blows my mind. And yeah, I've had some like cute work moments lately, um, at both places, just building friendships, and that's been like hard for me here. But no, it's just like a totally different, um, like I've been learning like the really weird details about Utah from like a policy perspective. Did not know this whole time that they don't have a lottery here because gambling is against the Bible.
Oh, lit.
Um, well, all of the liquor stores are owned and operated by the state. They're very small and shitty. But the place I go in Nevada to get alcohol does free samples.
Hell yeah.
So that's super exciting. I can't go into too much detail about some of the stuff that I've learned because it would out what I do for work, and I don't like to be open about that, but it's just always a mind fuck. Um, and I started an ancestral veneration practice, but I'm going to talk more about that in my hermitude segment. We have a new household member. So fucking Aries, man.
Wait, didn't you find out that
Yeah.
someone that you love is an Aries? Tim Curry.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Tim Curry is an Aries. I don't think that Frankenfurter would be.
Do we think that Frankenfurter had a different zodiac sign? Because
You can't talk about this at all because you have not seen the movie.
I watched it last night.
Shut the fuck up.
You were busy.
Dude, you should have just let me know. I would have left the whole grieving thing to watch Rocky Horror with you.
Oh my God.
What did you think?
It's great. It's so
It's
fun.
amazing.
I
It's
know.
so amazing. I would fuck everyone in that movie.
I know.
Um,
It is so ahead of its time in such a wild way.
Yeah.
It just is a nice reminder that everyone has always been this horny and this messy.
Yeah. But yeah, I just don't see Frankenfurter being an Aries.
I think Frankenfurter, because they were born in a different solar system, they would have an entirely different zodiac to look at. So they're more like a
definitely not an Aries.
Sun, Ferdegert rising, and a moon. So actually, I take that back. I don't think they're a moon. I think they're a moon.
You heard it here first, folks.
We have sorted out some alien zodiac zodiastry. I'm just making up words now. Go on.
Okay, but we do have to watch it again together. I am seriously so heartbroken because I know that you didn't learn the songs correctly, and they're aliens, and I just wanted to see that big reveal. When Riff Raff and Magenta show up at the end, and Riff Raff just has that like sick ponytail, and Magenta is just so hot. Like
Magenta's
so
the one with the Frankenstein hair.
Yes. Yeah. I love her. Anyway, I just watched Rocky Horror a couple nights ago, which is why it's like so on the brain, and finally pressured Ruth into doing the right thing and watching.
I was gonna bring this up earlier because you were talking about Pluto return. Wow. You were talking about America's Pluto return.
The US, not America.
Yes. The United States of America's Pluto return. And that I think is exact in February of next year. It goes exact. So like we're kind of building up to a pretty potent time.
Are we building?
Yeah.
We're just building to it. We're not there yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are in it. And we are also right about to have an eclipse season. So we will be experiencing some cute Sagittarius and Gemini eclipses. So I wanted to keep things light for this Scorpio season, which feels a little contradictory, but also no, let's stay in the shallow side of the pool while we can. So I wanted to talk about the delightful and wonderful and magical love that we experience through the Addams family.
Yes. Oh my God.
I know, I'm very excited.
That's why you've been singing that song.
Yes, it's been stuck in my head because I've been watching all of the movies and the show. I know that there are multiple shows, but I just kind of delved a little bit into the 1960s show, which is the first show.
Yeah.
And in my research discovered that it started out as like a comic, and then there's been like comic books, and I think there's been like actual books. Like the Addams Family has just been legendary for a long time. Didn't realize that. I grew up knowing the Addams Family as the movies.
Yes.
With Angelica Houston and Christopher, whatever his last name is. And Christina Ricci. Oh, it's Italian.
Ricci.
So it's Ricci. Yeah, it's Ricci. Anyway, I'm fluent. Anyway, so that's my primary source here, but also like got some love from the show as well. And also from some delightful Reddit channels where people are just like expressing their pure love for the Addams Family. And it's so great. So I just wanted to talk about how the Addams Family being this like macabre, like dark side of life, they're so twisted kind of family. They actually show so much more love than we see and it's like cheesy, the amount of love and affection that they show for each other within the context of like, we're so dark or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think that, that's kind of my first point, is really just that they delight in the dark. They delight in their own dysfunction even. And it really reminds me of how when you embrace your shadow side and incorporate it in with the light, you're so much more fully able to enjoy the kind of beauty and pleasantries in life. Like they're always having so much fun. And you get the sense that like when they're like, oh yes, like let me torture you, it's just like fun to them. And even these like horrific sides of life, they're just allowing themselves to have fun with it. And I don't know, the whole time I've been watching it and thinking about it, it's just reminds me of how when you allow like the kind of like gnarly bits to bubble up to the surface and you kind of express those in a playful way, it makes it so that you don't keep those like resentments against other people. It makes it so that you don't have like building up tension. You are able to like fully enjoy people because you also, are like, what was the thing you got mad at me for at the beginning of this? Oh, because I said I'm 3/4 of the podcast.
Yes.
And like, for example, like,
so mad. I was just about to quit.
Well, yeah. And I know that you were very serious about that, but that is the kind of thing that like, if we don't allow ourselves this sense of playfulness and this sense of like, Ruth, your fucking ego, or whatever, like if we don't give ourselves that release, that shit becomes overwhelming and then comes out in a really dark way, which I think you find in more traditional sitcoms and whatnot, is these like happy families that are actually incredibly fucked up. Whereas you find this like fucked up family that's like actually pretty cute. So I've got some cute examples. In the beginning of the first movie, there's this moment where like Morticia, the mom, is like laying in bed and lounging and the sun's coming through the blinds and she's just like, oh God, it's so terrible. And as like an act of love, Gomez goes and gets rid of the sun for her. And it's just like, oh no, of course, like let's get that out of here. And it's just like, it's just so, they're like delighting in their like sense of like dark and spookiness. The kids at one point play a game called Is There a God? And I think they're just like torturing someone or the baby or something like that. And I just love that even the kids are able to like entertain these like dark parts of themselves where they're questioning like, you know, some huge questions that so many parents would be like, of course there's a Jesus or whatever. And they're just really enjoying this as a game.
Aren't they? Isn't the whole point that they're trying to kill to conclude if there is a God or not?
I believe
I feel
so,
like they're
yeah.
constantly trying to murder each other, and it's so
Yes,
cute.
yeah, exactly. Oh, that might be, Wednesday might have said that when she is putting Pugsley in an electric chair. And it's great because they just like allow them to electrocute each other. And obviously, like in this world, they live outside of like the realm of mortality that we understand. And so they're able to like entertain even darker things than we could. Like it would be pretty abusive to let your kids electrocute each other. But I think, you know, they are a mythical tale that gives us that, like, just like let your kids fuck each other up a little bit. Yeah, there's a school play, and like the first kids are doing this school play that's all just like do like friendship and love or whatever. And I love too that there's this great scene where Morticia and Gomez are clearly so bored. And then they get so delighted when their kids go on and they do this like just gore, like just, you know, blood spewing everywhere.
Yes.
And like they, you know, the kids are like just whatever, embracing all of this like blood and death, and the parents are delighted because it's hilarious. And then there's also like there's so much talk of death. And, you know, one of the ways that they talk about death is like they visit their ancestors, they visit their family graves a lot. There's a scene where Morticia and Gomez talk about how like one day we'll be rotting together side by side forever. And it's so romantic to them. And there's, you know, they lack like a fear of that darker side of life, which I think is really beautiful. It points to like having more of a timeless perspective, that they just are able to delight in all the aspects of their human experience rather than just the life and the pleasant things. And also like when Morticia gives birth, there's, you know, Gomez is like, is it torture? And she's like, just call me like, yes. And he's like, oh, like he thinks it's so great because they just love torture. And even the torture of childbirth, you know, like they're kind of unfazed by these like things that we've deemed like good and bad. They just allow them to happen as they are.
They also just have such a healthy relationship with death and mortality, I think, like especially like when they're in the graveyard, like their ancestors are very much there, and like they are just in relationship with the dead, like in a way that most of us are not.
This kind of comes into, and it's very like, this is actually where this is so Scorpio season, really, because it's all about like sex and death, and their sexuality is just unabashed. It's open. It's very playful. It's super fun. And there's also several moments where it really subverts patriarchal ideas. Like this shit was made in the 90s.
Yeah.
This is the era when I learned the word slut, you know, like that. And it was not a cute thing. So there's like cute moments where, you know, like Morticia looks at Gomez and is like, you were, you know, like a monster last night. You were unhinged. And then she's just like, do it again. And like, they really, you know, in their sexuality allow themselves to express like the weirdest like parts of themselves. And it's so great. And they also basically have code words. This shows up a little bit more in the show, but anytime that Morticia says anything in French, like hors d'oeuvre, deja vu, Gomez just goes nuts. And it's kind of like, it becomes like a code word for them. That's like, if she knows she has that power, then she's only going to speak in French when she like wants Gomez to start giving kisses up her arm, you know? And then let's not undervalue the amazing dynamic of a husband worshiping his wife. Like he worships her and she just basks in it. There's never any, she never puts herself down. She does not need to be like, oh, I just want to love you, worship you too. It's like, no. You are an absolute goddess, Morticia. And of course he worships you.
Yeah.
And he also like doesn't lose his masculinity, doesn't suffer for that. They don't have to prove it in like dad's angry kind of ways, although he does get a little aggressive with his trains. But I honestly think that that's more of a benevolent thing than anything else. But yeah, so that's adorable. There's a moment where the kids are in the hospital waiting for the mom to have the baby. And there's like a little blonde girl who's like, my parents like went to a baby stork and the stork went and chose a baby from a pumpkin patch or something stupid. It's like this most insane, like this awful bullshit about like how babies were born. And Wednesday just says, my parents had sex. And like, just no qualms about it. Just, she knew what it was. We weren't teaching our kids anything like fucked up or weird because we were just like, no, we're having sex. Of course we're having sex. That's how you create a baby. Love that journey. And then there's a great moment in the second movie where Fester's love interest, in order to try and entice him and like appeal to, and she's kind of a Black Widow character. So she, draws in men and kills them for their money. And she's trying to tempt him as she's tempted so many men before. And one of the things she says is she's like, ashamedly kind of like, oh, I'm a virgin. And I died laughing at the scene because he just goes, what's that? It's so great. He just doesn't even know what it is.
Yeah.
Like, and then, in the end, whatever, it doesn't even matter how that ends because it's not that cool. But I just love that that's like a part of his like life where he's like, huh?
Yeah.
And, he's not unsexual as a being, but he's just like, what's a virgin? Why would I know about this stupid patriarchal thing?
Yeah.
There's also a really sweet thing that you see in mostly the first, well, actually, no, in both of the movies where I'm excluding the reunion, by the way. It's so bad. I tried to watch it and I was like, no, we're not doing that to ourselves. But in the first two movies, they really like create a sense of family, even with people that think that they're not family. And this, I feel like, ties into the ways that so many of us like who are more or less estranged from our family experience a sense of family with people who really resonate with us. So in the first movie, Fester's fake mom is, I'm giving things away, by the way, there's spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen these movies from the 90s. But Fester's mom is like incredibly abusive. And while Fester's kind of enjoying this family that he's like faking being a part of, she's like, they're not your family. They don't love you, but I'm your family and I love you. And she makes him feel bad for like having fun with the kids. She makes him feel like an idiot. She makes him feel silly. And he's coming from this abusive family, but he's like finding a home in this family. And he, in a really beautiful way, that whole first movie is about Fester finding his way back to his soul family.
Yeah.
And, in the end, he actually is their family, which I think is like such a beautiful allusion to the things that many of us go through as we like find our way to our soul family.
Yeah.
And then in the second movie, the femme fatale, the Black Widow, when she has all of them hooked up to electric chairs because she's going to kill them, she's explaining her backstory and why she is the way she is. And it's really lame. It's like her mom didn't give her the right Barbie doll. And so, whatever. These movies are fucking fluff and I love it. But I love that as she's like, I'm not a Malibu Barbie type. I'm this kind of Barbie. Like she got the wrong Barbie doll. And she's so upset. And that's what turned her into a serial killer. As she's saying this, the whole family is like, oh yes. Yeah. That's really hard. And they're just like, she's about to murder them. And they don't even care. They have compassion and they understand her perspective and they validate her perspective, even as she's being murderous to them.
Yes.
It's so sweet. It's their, this lack of attachment to their own mortality allows them to really be there with other people's humanity, even when their humanity is horrifying.
Yeah.
And then they're super in touch with their ancestors. So you are so right. There's a scene in the graveyard, for one thing, and this is kind of back to them just like delighting in all of the macabre, where Fester says to Morticia, your life is all fun and games. You dance in a graveyard, which I just love. Mm-hmm. And then there's a scene where they're like, let's go hang out with our ancestors. And then what I like noticed, and it was such a small thing, but one of the adults says to the kids, because the kids are just kind of dancing around, and one of the adults says, you have to dig. That's half the fun. And it reminded me of like the work that it takes to get in touch with your ancestors. Mm-hmm. You have to put in the work in order to be able to like hear the messages that your ancestors are wanting to tell you, and to learn the lessons that they have for you. And to also just enjoy their weird, messed up graves and lives that they have in the Addams family.
Yes.
So the last thing, and probably the thing that I love the most about the Addams family, is that they are so revolutionary. So revolutionary.
They do have a guillotine.
Yeah, there's many a guillotine that pop up in this. There's a lot of talk about the French Revolution. The kids clearly in the show and the movie very much understand the French Revolution. There's several moments where Wednesday has like a headless doll. There's a moment where they try to kill the little baby brother that they're jealous of, and they're treating him like he's what's her face? You know.
Marie Antoinette.
Thank you. Yes. But yeah, so they like allude to this. So the kids are clearly aware of like, you know, the hottest revolution we've ever had in history, maybe. I don't know. But I don't want to give French people that much credit. But anyway, there's a great moment where the family is very downtrodden, and the Morticia basically says that their motto is, and like has everyone chant with her, we gladly feast on those who would subdue us. Just like, like mm-hmm. I want that in like a fucking print on my wall.
Yes.
There's a great moment where they're in the school, in the kids' school, and like the teacher is showing Morticia, she's concerned because Wednesday's hero is like one of their ancestors, who's Calpurnia Addams, mm-hmm. and who was burned as a witch, danced naked in the town square, and enslaved a minister.
That's so cool.
And so the teacher's like, we're a little bit concerned. And she's like, these are the other children's. And there's like Ronald Reagan and Jane Pauley. And Morticia is just like, have you spoken to their parents? Like, to have Ronald Reagan as your hero? I think not.
Yeah.
And then her response to the whole interest in Calpurnia is just like, well, we've told her that she has to go to college before she can like continue on in that line. Like before mm-hmm. she enslaves a minister, she has to go to college. This kind of comes into, and it's very like, this is actually where this is so Scorpio season, really, because it's all about like sex and death, and their sexuality is just unabashed. It's open. It's very playful. It's super fun. And there's also several moments where it really subverts patriarchal ideas. Like this shit was made in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is the era when I learned the word slut, you know, like that. And it was not a cute thing. So there's like cute moments where, you know, like Morticia looks at Gomez and is like, you were, you know, like a monster last night. You were unhinged. And then she's just like, do it again. Mm-hmm. And like, they really, you know, in their sexuality allow themselves to express like the weirdest like parts of themselves. And it's so great. And they also basically have code words. This shows up a little bit more in the show, but anytime that Morticia says anything in French, like hors d'oeuvre, deja vu, Gomez just goes nuts. And it's kind of like, it becomes like a code word for them. That's like, if she knows she has that power, then she's only going to speak in French when she like wants Gomez to start giving kisses up her arm, you know? And then let's not undervalue the amazing dynamic of a husband worshiping his wife. Like he worships her, and she just basks in it. There's never any, she never puts herself down. She does not need to be like, oh, I just want to love you, worship you too. It's like, no. You are an absolute goddess, Morticia. And of course he worships you.
Yeah.
And he also like doesn't lose his masculinity, doesn't suffer for that. They don't have to prove it in like dad's angry kind of ways, although he does get a little aggressive with his trains. But I honestly think that that's more of a benevolent thing than anything else. But yeah, so that's adorable. There's a moment where the kids are in the hospital waiting for the mom to have the baby, and there's like a little blonde girl who's like, my parents like went to a baby stork and the stork went and chose a baby from a pumpkin patch or something stupid. It's like this most insane, like this awful bullshit about like how babies were born. And Wednesday just says, my parents had sex. And like, just no qualms about it. Just, she knew what it was. We weren't teaching our kids anything like fucked up or weird, because we were just like, no, we're having sex. Of course we're having sex. That's how you create a baby. Love that journey. And then there's a great moment in the second movie where Fester's love interest, in order to try and entice him and like appeal to, and she's kind of a Black Widow character. So she, draws in men and kills them for their money. And she's trying to tempt him as she's tempted so many men before. And one of the things she says is she's like, ashamedly kind of like, oh, I'm a virgin. And I died laughing at this scene because he just goes, what's that? It's so great. He just doesn't even know what it is. Yeah. Like, and then, in the end, whatever, it doesn't even matter how that ends because it's not that cool. But I just love that that's like a part of his like life where he's like, huh? Yeah. And, he's not unsexual as a being, but he's just like, what's a virgin? Why would I know about this stupid patriarchal thing? Yeah. There's also a really sweet thing that you see in mostly the first, well, actually, no, in both of the movies, where I'm excluding the reunion, by the way. It's so bad. I tried to watch it and I was like, no, we're not doing that to ourselves. But in the first two movies, they really like create a sense of family, even with people that think that they're not family. And this, I feel like, ties into the ways that so many of us, like who are more or less estranged from our family, experience a sense of family with people who really resonate with us. So in the first movie, Fester's fake mom is, I'm giving things away, by the way, there's spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen these movies from the 90s. But Fester's mom is like incredibly abusive. And while Fester's kind of enjoying this family that he's like faking being a part of, she's like, they're not your family. They don't love you, but I'm your family and I love you. And she makes him feel bad for like having fun with the kids. She makes him feel like an idiot. She makes him feel silly. And he's coming from this abusive family, but he's like finding a home in this family. And he, in a really beautiful way, that whole first movie is about Fester finding his way back to his soul family. Yeah. And, in the end, he actually is their family, which I think is like such a beautiful allusion to the things that many of us go through as we like find our way to our soul family. Yeah. And then in the second movie, the femme fatale, the Black Widow, when she has all of them hooked up to electric chairs because she's going to kill them, she's explaining her backstory and why she is the way she is. And it's really lame. It's like her mom didn't give her the right Barbie doll. And so, whatever. These movies are fucking fluff and I love it. But I love that as she's like, I'm not a Malibu Barbie type. I'm this kind of Barbie. Like she got the wrong Barbie doll and she's so upset. And that's what turned her into a serial killer. As she's saying this, the whole family is like, oh yes. Yeah. That's really hard. And they're just like, she's about to murder them and they don't even care. They have compassion and they understand her perspective and they validate her perspective, even as she's being murderous to them. Yes. It's so sweet. It's their, this lack of attachment to their own mortality allows them to really be there with other people's humanity, even when their humanity is horrifying. Yeah. And then they're super in touch with their ancestors. So you are so right. There's a scene in the graveyard for one thing, and this is kind of back to them just like delighting in all of the macabre, where Fester says to Morticia, your life is all fun and games. You dance in a graveyard, which I just love.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a scene where they're like, let's go hang out with our ancestors. And then what I like noticed, and it was such a small thing, but one of the adults says to the kids, because the kids are just kind of dancing around, and one of the adults says, you have to dig. That's half the fun. And it reminded me of like the work that it takes to get in touch with your ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
You have to put in the work in order to be able to like hear the messages that your ancestors are wanting to tell you, and to learn the lessons that they have for you. And to also just enjoy their weird, messed up graves and lives that they have in the Addams family.
Yes.
So the last thing, and probably the thing that I love the most about the Addams family, is that they are so revolutionary. So revolutionary.
They do have a guillotine.
Yeah, there's many a guillotine that pop up in this. There's a lot of talk about the French Revolution. The kids clearly in the show and the movie very much understand the French Revolution. There's several moments where Wednesday has like a headless doll. There's a moment where they try to kill the little baby brother that they're jealous of, and they're treating him like he's what's her face? You know.
Marie Antoinette.
Thank you. Yes. But yeah, so they like allude to this. So the kids are clearly aware of like, you know, the hottest revolution we've ever had in history, maybe. I don't know. But I don't want to give French people that much credit. But anyway, there's a great moment where the family is very downtrodden, and the Morticia basically says that their motto is, and it like has everyone chant with her, we gladly feast on those who would subdue us. Just like, like I want that in like a fucking print on my wall.
Yes.
There's a great moment where they're in the school, in the kids' school, and like the teacher is showing Morticia, she's concerned because Wednesday's hero is like one of their ancestors, who's Calpurnia Addams, and who was burned as a witch, danced naked in the town square, and enslaved a minister.
That's so cool.
And so the teacher's like, we're a little bit concerned. And she's like, these are the other children's. And there's like Ronald Reagan and Jane Pauley. And Morticia is just like, have you spoken to their parents? Like, to have Ronald Reagan as your hero? I think not.
Yeah.
And then her response to the whole interest in Calpurnia is just like, well, we've told her that she has to go to college before she can like continue on in that line. Like before she enslaves a minister. She has to go to college. So throughout the show and the movies, it becomes clear that like the worst thing their kids could possibly do is like become the president or join the Boy Scouts or play baseball. They're just like so disgusted by that.
Yes.
Which is delightful.
Are you going to talk about the play?
Obviously.
Okay.
So when the kids are at camp, love the symbolism. Pugsley just kills a bald eagle. And like, I'm not here for like bird murder for birder, but I am absolutely here for killing symbolically like the bald eagle of America. It's just, and they go after America in the second one, as they fucking should.
Yeah.
The United States is obviously what I mean by America. But so they go after the US, and the best thing, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense because it's a fucking summer camp and they're doing a Thanksgiving play. They just wanted to do this, and I love it. So they're supposed to be telling the traditional Thanksgiving story that we all learned, which is exactly just a story, where, you know, like the Native Americans go and give corn to the white people, and then they have a great dinner together. And throughout that entire movie, there's a little blonde girl who's just the pinnacle of privilege, and she tries to get the other kids in trouble, and she's just like such an asshole. You just fucking want to kick her.
She's also the same character in Donnie Darko.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just watched Donnie Darko.
That's her type.
Like, that's the girl. She's acting the same way.
That's the one.
In Donnie Darko.
So they have all of the other like able-bodied, thin, blonde kids, as the like, what do they call them? Pioneers, the pilgrims, the many terms we use for colonizers. So they have all of those kids there. And then surprisingly, all of the kids who are playing Indigenous Americans are the Black, brown, Jewish kids, the fat kids, the ones with disabilities, the quote unquote nerdy kids. And then obviously the Addams are grouped in with that. And I want to go ahead and say that like the 90s was not a great time. Like this is not my overwhelming analysis of this being a perfect representation of anything it should have been, because like, pretty sure if they had consulted any Indigenous person, they would have been like, no. So instead of doing this, like, thank you, sir, for the corn, like kind of crap, the kids end up torching the entire play and campground. They throw pies in the faces of the parents. And they like shoot arrows at the people who like the camp counselors who tried to like make all of this happen. And then Wednesday just has an epic monologue. And so instead of, you know, being the perfect like Indigenous American, just lapping up the kindness of the colonizers, she just says, "We cannot break bread with you. You have taken the land which is rightfully ours. Years from now, my people will be forced to live in mobile homes on reservations. Your people will wear cardigans and drink highballs. We will sell our bracelets by the roadsides. You will play golf and enjoy hot hors d'oeuvres. My people will have pain and degradation and motorcycles."
Always motorcycles.
Oh my God. Just get a muffler. It's not hard. She says, "My people will have pain and degradation. Your people will have stick shifts. The gods of my tribe have spoken. They have said, do not trust the pilgrims." Just perfection.
Yeah, I love that.
And, you know, again, like the 90s did not understand the difference between helpful and unhelpful representation.
Right.
This could have been a much better scene. And it would have been, because we as a society have learned a lot since 1993 or so when it was made. But
well, don't you think that the representation of the Indigenous people was like very intentional, because the play was such a bastardization of the story that of course they're going to use tropes and stereotypes in the representation of Native Americans, because the whole thing is just trash?
I mean, I think so, but I kind of feel like looking back, at least on my perception of it as a child, I don't think that any nuances there were like kept for me. I think that I just was like, oh yeah, that's what like Indigenous Americans are like.
Yeah.
And you know, they're, again, like, I don't know, I would be curious to see like how would an Indigenous person write that, because maybe they would come up with something way fucking cooler that I can't even conceive of.
Yeah.
And you know, it's also definitely an instance of like, this is not their place. And I think that ultimately, if I were to criticize that, it would be that like, that was a lot of white people and it was a lot of non-Indigenous people who were acting out very traditional tropes about Indigenous Americans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that in itself is pretty painful to watch. Even though it's it's what's following this, like, and it is part of like the uprising against all of this shit. And so you're like glorying in that, but you're also like, ugh, it's a little painful to watch.
Yeah.
But I don't know, you know, I think it's my place to understand that it should have been a lot better, but I don't think that I'm the person who's going to like come up with, and I wish that I was better educated and could be like, here's maybe a few different ways we could have played that out. But all I know is that I was like, oh, cringe. Last thing is that despite their identification with oppressed folks, which they really play out in that, in the Thanksgiving play, they do remain empowered, and they call out the like victimhood that the oppressors kind of play at. There's a great scene where at summer camp, Wednesday and the blonde girl are being asked to participate in a volunteer exercise, a swimming exercise, where they one person needs to be saved and the other person will save them. So they're kind of learning safety or whatever. And they're like, who wants to be the victim and who wants to be the, like, I don't know, EMT or whatever. And the little blonde girl goes, I'll be the victim. And Wednesday just goes,
all your life.
Yep. So good. So there's like such a deep sense of empowerment, and also just like calling out the bullshit of all of this privilege. I mean, that whole camp is just set up so they can poke holes in rich privileged people, and it's really fucking delightful to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But it also showcases just how revolutionary they are in so many ways. And again, like that stuff was there in the 1960s show. Those kids were talking about the French Revolution. Like,
Yeah.
it's always been a part of the Addams family lore. And it's interesting that being revolutionary would lead you, or, you know, chicken versus the egg, I guess, but both that goes hand in hand with that comfort with death, that comfort with the darker side of life, that comfort with our mortality, etc. So just giving a lot of love to the Addams family for this Scorpio season disco love.
Yes. I love that. A very appropriate choice, in my opinion.
I am so ready for this hermitude.
Okay. So I have been reading a book about ancestor veneration called Honoring Your Ancestors. I will obviously put it in the show notes. And my relationship to my ancestors has been very, because of me, just like very off and on. And I've heard some really great recommendations for offerings, because there's a lot that I am trying to address and a lot of relationships that I'm trying to build with spirit. Like I am doing the Juno Jar service with Alexis. And so that kind of like, it doesn't require, but you really want to have like regular offerings to Juno. And then I also have like my like Saturn thing going on very half-heartedly. And
Yes.
now I have my ancestors, and Jason Miller in his book Strategic Sorcery kind of lays out how can you like provide offerings to all of the different beings that you're working with in just a much more efficient way. But this is like specifically about ancestor veneration, and it's a very short and sweet book, and it's just very helpful. And the author comes from both an Italian tradition and then a more, I think, Afro-Caribbean background as well. And so there's just a lot of, sorry, Sherlock just opened the door and walked right in. So she has like a pretty diverse approach to honoring your ancestors and does a really good job of kind of breaking apart like this is something that belongs to a specific tradition. You don't have to do this if it doesn't work for you. But I think for me, it's just been like I've had pictures printed of my grandparents and Sasha for a while, but just no frames or like no way to display them. So I finally just got the frames, and I was offering like the first bit of coffee in the morning, but then learning that coffee is like meant to like energize your ancestors. Like if you have something that needs to get done and you want it to get done now, you're like gonna give them coffee to like, come on, let's go. Um, but otherwise just like fresh water, sharing your food with them, like cooking food that is of your tradition. And so I bought some moonshine when I was in Nevada because my ancestors, when they um, immigrated over, a lot of them ended up in Kentucky, and specifically the part of Kentucky where they brewed their own moonshine. And so I have been, oh my God, I specifically chose a brand that was brewed in, I think it was Tennessee, which was the closest that I could find at this discount liquor store. And it's called White Lightning. So I assume it has like meth in it. I don't know. And it's just straight ethanol. And so when
Yeah.
I like opened it and I was like, oh, I'll just like share this with my ancestors. Like I'll just drink this with them. And I was like, hell no. I am not drinking this moonshine. I've had the like, doesn't like Jack Daniels like have like an apple pie moonshine that's like super sweet and whatever.
That does not sound like moonshine to me. Moonshine is supposed to hurt.
Yeah.
It's part of recognizing the struggle of your people.
But they like can put fruit in it, like, and so the only moonshine I've ever had was like one of those super like sweetened with like apples and cinnamon, whatever. Um,
That's not moonshine.
but I decided not to share with my ancestors. And then the whole next day I was like, how are they going to respond? But it's hard too because like I only have a picture of my grandma, a picture of my grandpa, and a picture of Sasha,
Mm-hmm.
none of who would drink moonshine. And I'm like kind of wrestling with the fact that I have this one visual representation of who my ancestors are. And so when I see that, it's hard for me to think all the way back to mitochondrial Eve. Like it's hard for me to remember that my ancestry is so much more. And so of course I have ancestors that are going to be excited by moonshine and they're going to appreciate that specific offering. Um and like I also make offerings of wine. Um but there's this one part where she talks about how it's okay if you don't know who your ancestors are. Like, it's okay if you're adopted. Like, you can obviously work with your adoptive ancestors, or, you know, like as you reach back, they reach for it. And so I had this really cool experience. Like 2 days after I started venerating my ancestors and like lighting the candle and like offering them water, I was like talking with one of my coworkers about the moonshine thing and how I was just like so shocked when I opened that jar and was like, oh my God, this is awful. Just the smell of it was just like, this is awful. I'm not going to drink this. And she thought it was so funny. And she started telling all of my coworkers. And, um, which was just kind of awkward because like, that's like a very specific witchy thing that like ancestor veneration is just like, oh, I don't think too many LDS folks are out buying hard liquor for their ancestors, but
So and it occurs to me that like, how would you define ancestor veneration? Like for those who might not know, and sorry if it's a little late in you talking about this to bring that up, but it is a witchy thing. It's a thing that's culturally been done by pretty much everyone. But how do you describe that?
well, it's funny because I think that people do it without realizing that they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like all throughout Michael's house are just shelves of pictures of his ancestors. And like his dad's like space is filled with pictures of his ancestors, but then like he's like really into shooting, and so he's like combined this thing. It looks like an ancestral altar. And so to me, like ancestral veneration is just acknowledging, um, hi Sherlock, um, acknowledging our ancestors in a physical way. And she kind of emphasizes that. Like, if you're just praying to your ancestors in your mind will change. Like, the way that you think about them is going to change. But if it's just in your mind, like, it's not going to affect your physical experience. So, by like having the pictures or a piece of paper with their names on it and like setting out the cup of water, you're inviting them to manifest physical change in your life. And yes,
Although
I,
she is still living and
yes.
not my like bloodline ancestor, but this bitch is
Hmm.
absolutely a spiritual ancestor. I'm also looking at, I have a tarot card of Marsha P. Johnson as the angel in the lover's card.
Hmm.
And it's interesting,
Yeah.
like even just thinking about, because I've often thought about like ancestry, spiritual ancestors. So there he is. That's a Francois. Um, I've thought about spiritual ancestry and thought about like who in what lineages do I follow? And it's not
Right.
necessarily like I would not call on Marsha P. Johnson to interact with me in any way because that doesn't feel appropriate for a lot of reasons.
Hmm.
Uh, but she's someone that I like take on the lineage of like, oh, you've like led the way, and I'm going to continue in the lineage that you left, in the legacy that you left.
Yeah. And she definitely breaks down like the difference between those kinds of ancestors, like blood, spirit, and all of that. And so
like I might call on Dolly, you know, she's like straight rich white woman, like
yeah.
Although she did grow up poor. Same.
Yeah. I was thinking about Marilyn Buck as one of my like spiritual ancestors. But like right now I'm just working with like, I've used ancestry.com and gone back just like a couple of generations because I don't trust this. But anyway, I was talking to my coworkers about like, well, my coworker was like snitching on me to everyone about how I'm trying to give my ancestors moonshine. But I was kind of explaining to this older woman that I work with who is LDS, and I don't know if you know this about LDS, but they are very obsessive about ancestry. And I was talking with her about, well, this is where my ancestors came from, and so I'm trying to find ways to connect with them. And she was like, and I've had a problem with, I like really deeply upset her a while ago, because I was shitting on Mormon pioneers, as I do, in my workplace.
You're like, it's not just the Mormon ones.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't make it better.
In Utah, we do celebrate the Mormon ones, but pretty specifically. And so I have felt really bad because things have been not great and between her and I, but she pulled me aside and she's like, have you heard of the Long Huntsman? And I was like, no, I have not. And so she starts telling me about that part of Kentucky where my ancestors are from and just some interesting facts about that area and like maybe what my ancestors could have been doing. And it's so cool because in the book, she specifically talks about like, even if you don't know anything about your ancestors, you will learn about them in ways that you could never conceive of or even hope to understand. And so here I have this like coworker who I've kind of been on the outs with, who is just suddenly like, oh my God. Who is just suddenly like very wanting to just tell me everything about our shared like region. And
what's the Long Huntsman?
So that was folks who would be like, they would leave their families for months and months at a time, kind of like expeditiously. That probably did not use that word right, but they would go out to kind of like gain more land. It's not like the cutest thing, but or just to like trappers, like people who to do their job would have to be gone for long periods of time. But it sounds pretty fucking cool.
Yeah,
my
I mean,
great grandfather was a Long Huntsman. I mean, I don't know that, but it's cool to say.
But also it's funny because you're someone who like really loves to be alone. And that's maybe part of your tradition.
Yeah. Also, she talks about saints and like working with the saints, and one of the things that she mentions is like, who is the saint associated with your birthday? And mine is Saint Paula, I believe her name is. And she was part of a tradition called the Desert Mothers.
What?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And she was maybe like romantically involved with Saint Jerome. But writers at the time kind of were like, he's holding her back. Like, his jealousy is like, she's like a very talented mystic, and Saint Jerome is just totally cramping her style.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I have been thinking a lot. Well, on the note of ancestry and ancestors, I am not much of a cook, but I used to bake quite a bit. And I especially used to bake weed cookies. And my ancestors on my dad's side were Danish bakers and came over here late 1800s, early 1900s as bakers. My great grandpa was a baker on a boat that went back and forth between Denmark and the US. And eventually he was like, okay, US it is. But they were Danish bakers. And I recently got myself a Danish cook and bake book.
That's perfect.
Yeah, which is fun because like Danes aren't exactly known for their food. So it'll be interesting to try and like revive some of it. But
Yeah.
I know like really they're not known much for their like cooking, but they are known for their baking. So it's kind of awesome that there were bakers in my family. And obviously I think it would be really fun to bake weed versions of whatever I bake.
Yes.
And I feel like it's one of those things that's like venerating my ancestors in my own way, and also kind of, you know, making peace with the fact that a lot of those ancestors were also spiritual leaders who taught Christianity and colonized with Christianity.
Yeah.
And I imagine that depending on where they are in their ego journey, I guess, that there's a good amount of regret. And so I think that a part of me working with my ancestors has been like rejuvenating the things, you know, for example, as a spiritual practitioner, doing that, but trying to make it not a colonizer way to be. And then also like tapping into the earth's resources and giving everyone weed joy.
Yes. I love that.
I'm excited. I should bake on Halloween. Let's go.
Yes. Yes. Highly recommend it. I mean, my short experience, like last night, you know, Michael's grandmother passed away yesterday morning, and that's just been, yeah, it's been an experience. But last night he and I did a ritual together, and it was so powerful. Like, we're approaching Halloween and the veil is thin, and I literally just feel like I could feel them like around us. And I got really emotional because I haven't spent it's been it's been years since I spent time with my grandma and grandpa when they were healthy and well and in a way that was just really happy. And I look at this as like a legitimate way for me to have time with them again. And it's like an aching kind of joy because like it's not the same as like being with them and like enjoying them but like I still feel them and like I know that they're with me, and I'm excited to like extend that to like people that I've never met who, you know, are connected to me. So
that's awesome.
highly, highly recommend venerating your ancestors. And it can be so simple, like just writing their names on a piece of paper and offering them water or like a little bite of your food or whatever drink or drugs you feel comfortable sharing with them. Like, it's a thing.
I a couple of years ago made a honey jar, honey being something sweet to offer. So a very, very good intro offering is something sweet. Kind of sweetens the conversation, if you will. But we infused it with, it was a group of a few of us, and we infused it with spices and herbs that were from our ancestral tradition.
Yeah.
So I've got dill infused honey. Not sure if it's good. Haven't tried it. Don't actually really intend to.
Yeah.
But you know, it's really, I think like connecting through food is one of the easiest, fastest ways to connect with our ancestry. And so I also think that that can be a really cool thing. It's like, get a jar, stick some ancestral herbs in it. And, you know, everyone had to do research for this. Like, probably could have guessed dill, but, you know, and it's fascinating and interesting to think about. Like, now when I use things like rosemary and dill, I think about the fact that my ancestors have been using that for God knows how long.
Yeah. That's cool.
That's so cool. I love that. Oh, it's such a good Scorpio season. What do we call your segment? Sanyelle learns. Hermitude.
Yes.
Sanyelle learns.
And my demonology talismans will be here next week. So on the next episode of Medusa Circle, we will see if Sanyelle has survived her novice adventure into working with actual demons.
I love it. I have been working on updating all of my Halloween playlists, which obviously I have like a ton.
Yeah.
I've also been making our Scorpio playlist, which, dear listener, it only costs $3 to $11 a month, your choice, in order to receive our monthly playlists that go with the Zodiac season. Yes. So Libra was cute. We had a lot of like love and like a couple things about like making decisions and whatever. And Scorpio season is obviously going to be like sexy and intense, but like tolerably intense. I'm not doing, put it this way, the first song is the bullshit anthem where the main lyrics are take that bullshit and turn it into good shit. So it's good vibes, but it's that transmutation kind of Scorpio vibes.
We have to put more Willow, because Willow's a Scorpio. Of course she fucking is.
Love that. I know I need to decide which Beyonce song, because I'm pretty sure Beyonce has a Scorpio Mercury, which is why she slays us to the death. Yeah. Yes. Very excited about that. We are also offering our Zodiac readings for Scorpio season on our Buy Me a Coffee. You should check that out as well. We have had a gas of a time. We've had a gas of a time writing our tarot card readings for a few of our adept members. It's been very cool to interact with the few folks on a monthly basis and kind of be chatting with them about like what their tarot cards are saying over the course of a few months. And even though we don't get like huge replies back, it is very interesting because I feel like I'm building a relationship with them.
Yeah.
So get in on that, folks. You get personalized tarot readings from us.
Yes.
As always, if you would like to support us, you can sign up to be a member of our coven at buymeacoffee.com/Medusa's Circle. We do have 3 different tiers of membership. They include Zodiacal playlists, monthly readings, free personalized tarot readings, and access to coven meetings. Oh my God, our next coven meeting is going to be about hexing. It's going to be amazing. So help us grow as well. If you love us, leave a 5-star review for us on iTunes. Make us popular. I didn't get dressed up for nothing. Yes. I don't know how the YouTube algorithm works, but if you know, let us know. Do the thing. We appreciate it. We love you. Obviously, we have research to do.
The more money that you give us, the faster we'll get to the top list podcast recordings.
That is 100% true. Whew, boy, is that true.
Thank you so much for joining us on this new adventure of adding a visual component to our podcast. We will decide after editing if we will ever do this again. But I really enjoy this format. It feels a lot less stressful, more natural. So we will see. But thank you, as always, for tuning in to Medusa Circle, and we will catch you next time.
Yes. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. Thank you to Dolly.